Now that I, a 23-year-old female, am back from Germany, I've had some time to think over the events of my trip, but it's hard to think positively considering what happened to me the last night in Stuttgart, and I'd like a place to talk about it. I'd spent about 2 weeks traveling in Germany for the Euros, and considering how many fellow Scotland fans were there for the games, I never felt completely alone despite being a solo traveler in a foreign country. I guess I became too naive in trusting the older groups of Scots who buy me drinks and chat with me all night about where they're from and who they knew. Just typical Scottish chats, and I let my guard down. That last night in Stuttgart happened like most other nights in Germany. I'd be by myself and would get noticed by a group of older men or women who'd inquire about who I was with. When they heard that I was alone, they'd remark at how brave I was as a good-looking lassie, being there all by myself. I'd then be integrated into the group, drink with them, celebrate with them, and that night, cry with them after Scotland's loss. Determined to enjoy my last night, I said goodbye to my new friends, donned a short white dress draped in my Scotland flag, and went out looking for a good place to drink and dance with strangers I'd never meet again. I met a few people that night, but it was while I was alone that I met him. "That bag's bigger than you are." I heard a jolly older man wandered over to me. It was true. I had my rucksack with me that night. "Where's your boyfriend to carry it for you?" "I'm not sure yet, still deciding if he's going to be German or Scottish," I quipped back with a smile. Most of my interactions would start this way, with a friendly comment leading to an offer to come drink with their group. And after offering to take me to a nearby Irish pub to drink with him and his family, I graciously accepted and we began walking. He was overly exaggerating how incredible he thought I was for doing this alone, bowing to me and excitedly telling passer-bys how brave I was. I would smile awkwardly and change the subject. I wish I could say alarm bells were ringing, but they weren't. And after all, he was just a wee Scottish grandpa, one of many that I'd met that night. He began prodding on me if I had somewhere to sleep that night, remarking how they had room in their hotel if need be. "I wouldn't force myself on you or anything." And I froze. It was so unexpected. I truly looked at him for the first time since I had met him. He was a relatively short man, taller than me, with a larger build and wrinkles to match the white hair poking out from under his Scotland cap. He quickly explained how he knew that I'd be cautious about that sort of thing, being a smart girl, and that I could trust him. But again reiterated that he wouldn't force himself on me. I laughed nervously as all the beer I'd drunk earlier seemed to drain from my body and I began taking in my surroundings. "Where did you say your family were again?" "Just an Irish pub up this hill. So like I was saying." I didn't really pay attention to him. We were still on the populated main street of Stuttgart, but the numbers were dwindling the further we went. My ears pinged an alert to my brain signaling that I had just missed something important, or horrifying, so I mustered up a smile and politely said, "What did you say, sorry?" "That I'm a vegetarian, because I killed my 44th man in a vegetable field." "Oh. I've deployed in loads of countries. The first 6 lives I took were in Ireland." And my blood ran cold. I am a descendant of Irish immigrants who fled to Scotland to escape the brutality of the Troubles in Ireland. Did this man kill my family? "Killed 12 in Iraq." I could only listen to parts of his ramblings as I began desperately planning my escape, locking eyes with every person that walked past. There weren't many. We had almost reached the top of the main street now. "Why are you so tense all of a sudden?" The words brought me back to the conversation. "You know I can read you like a book. I'm doing all this for you, see? I want to protect you. And Molly, I can guarantee you right now, you don't realize how much danger you're in." I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder, spinning round to see a young German man smiling at me. "Scotland," he mentioned to my flag. "I love Scotland." "Is there anywhere to eat around here?" I blurted out, staring at him, praying that I'd turn around and the old man would be gone. Brief confusion crossed the German man's face before the old man began rapidly jumbling up the sentence "Sprechen Sie Deutsch" in an attempt to sound as if he was speaking German. "Essen," I whispered, and the young man pointed in the direction we had just walked from. "There's a McDonald's down there." I turned back to the old man, whose look I could only describe as emotionless, as if he was staring through me, like I was no longer there. I felt another cold shiver before smiling. "I'm gonna go grab something to eat, but I'll meet you at the Irish pub later." As if snapping back to his jolly self, the man quipped, "Now don't be like that. I'm off to a rave just now. I'm playing at it. You don't want to miss out." "I'll catch you later." I smiled, and the man's face again dropped into a blank stare before he turned and walked off. I think the German man called after me, but I didn't hear him. I kept my head down and walked wherever my feet wanted to take me. I couldn't think, only walk. I don't know how I got to the train station or how I got to the hostel. There were no Irish pubs in Stuttgart, or at least not in that direction. So, I was heading back to my hotel from a friend's house at about 3 a.m. the other night. My friend lives deep in Brooklyn, and my hotel was in Manhattan. If you know the city, you know that's about a 30 to 45-minute train ride, give or take. The train finally arrived, and I was happy to be headed home. I was exhausted, and it was late. My trip had been going unexpectedly well until that point, and so I had faith that I'd be able to get home with no worries, especially since the trains and streets were basically empty at this hour. The train was brand new and had just been cleaned, something I've never seen before. It even smelled like a new car and still had fresh mop water on the floor. There were only about 3 other people on the train, all minding their own business, and so far so good. About 2 stops into the train ride, a man who looked like he was in his late 20s stumbled into our train car mid-ride through the connecting doors. He had a Nike ski mask, a shiesty mask, if you know, you know, which usually isn't a good sign on a nice 70-degree night in general, but I'm not one to judge by appearance, I guess. Plus, I know the shiesty mask is sort of a trend nowadays, so I didn't think too much of it at first. He sort of hobbled in, clutching his stomach, almost like he was concealing something or hiding a wound. His eyes were bloodshot red, and at first I thought it was because he was high or something, and he immediately hobbled into the nearest corner and sort of sulked there until the next stop. Then he ran out of the closet door and erupted into the most painful crying I've ever heard. He was just screaming, moaning, and crying while stumble running alongside the stopped train on the platform, still clutching his stomach and screaming things like, "Why?" and gasping through his tears. Keep in mind that I'm sitting in the middle of the train facing away from the side that he got off of, so I'm kind of breaking my neck behind me to watch what's going on. He then ran back inside the same car through the door on the opposite side. He was on my right before, and now he's on my left. And there was no one in between me and him now, since everyone else was closer to the right side. He did the sulking while facing into the corner on the other side of the car now, but this time he kept screaming, crying, and yelling things like "why" again, but he was crying so hysterically that it was hard to make out a lot of what he was saying. From the certain words that I gathered, I'm almost positive that a very close friend of his had just gotten killed or something. It's the only thing that could explain why he was acting and the things that he was saying. Plus, he was suited up like he just came back from a street mission gone bad or something. At this point, everyone on the train was frantically flicking their eyes over to him every few seconds. You could tell that they were panicked, but not trying to cause a scene or rile him up more. I was getting a little sussed out myself, but I had seen and heard about worse on the subway, and if someone he knew had really just died, then I honestly felt horrible for the guy before anything else. But then the entire situation escalated to a point that I had only seen in movies or crime shows until now. The man stayed in this corner, crying, screaming, and muttering things to himself for another 3 minutes or so, all while still clutching his stomach as if he was concealing something. I had definitely seen a black object in his hands by this point, and I couldn't tell if it was big enough to be a gun or not. After I saw this, I tried not to take my eyes off of him for too long at a time since I was the closest person to him, but I also didn't want to stare. And by this point, he was starting to say concerning things like, "Someone's got to pay for this." And then he would just repeat it louder and louder. And then he burst into a dialogue that made my heart drop. Keep in mind, he's still facing the corner, hunched over, clutching his item.
"All you sitting on this train right now, y'all gonna feel me tonight. You hear me? Y'all gonna feel me tonight, and y'all gonna hate it too. Oh my God, y'all gonna hate this. Y'all gonna hate me."
And he kept getting louder and louder as he was saying this to the point where he was basically screaming by the last point. I don't know what he said after that, because as soon as that train stopped next, I bolted. He was screaming stuff at me as I got off too, but I couldn't hear it, and I definitely wasn't trying to turn back. I ran back up the nearest street exit, chain-smoked a couple of cigarettes, and waited 20 minutes for the next train to come. I've seen enough in my life to know that this wasn't a situation I was willing to gamble with at all. I pray the last 3 people in that train got home safe and nothing happened. And I briefly searched Twitter and the news the next day for any possible info I could find and didn't see anything. But who even knows what's worth a headline to them down there anymore? This happened last July, 2023, but a hilariously unfortunate Instagram notification reminded me of this unusual incident. My birthday was yesterday, and I, a 26-year-old male, got a Celebrate the Year notification that an algorithm paired with a picture of my black guy from when I first posted about what happened. And while this is far from the creepiest encounter on this subreddit, it's certainly a very bizarre and dangerous one. For context, I was a struggling homeless DoorDash delivery driver in New York City at the time of this incident. I say driver in quotes because back then, I didn't have a car or know how to ride a bike. I made deliveries either by taking the subway trains or limiting my delivery radius to a mile or less. I tried to stay in hostels whether I could afford them, but one unlucky night last July, I was out making deliveries at 4 in the morning since I had nowhere to go. Maneuvering on foot with food at this time made me an easy target, so I decided to stay near the highly populated and brightly lit Times Square area. I received an order from the Taco Bell in Times Square and accepted it since it paid well, and the destination was less than a mile away. As I turned the first corner, I felt something was off. I noticed 2 men walking closely behind me, and given the bright lights and tourists surrounding me, I initially dismissed the uneasy gut feeling that I was being stalked. And then they started walking faster and closer. I started changing my movement patterns, and they copied my exact movements. At this point, I realized that they were probably after the food that I was carrying, and I eventually yelled out loud, "Back off!" And they kept following closely behind. I started walking faster, and the men didn't stop, and they started increasing their speed. "Back off!" I yelled more aggressively, and they continued to follow closer. Tourists and bright lights still surrounded me, even at this point. As I approached the intersection into the following neighborhood, I continued shouting at these stalkers, and one of them yelled, "Shut up," while the other punched me right in my right eye. Luckily, this caught the attention of the police who were right at the intersection where I was hit. Unfortunately, this was also the moment that I lost faith in the NYPD. The men that attacked me fled at that moment, and 2 cops started chasing them. However, the bumbling morons lost sight of the attackers before even a minute passed. I stayed at the scene for about a half hour or so with about 6 officers, with a couple of them interviewing the many witnesses around. I remember feeling a sense of validation for what I just went through when one of the witnesses came up to me and said, "Dude, that's messed up, man. I hope they get him." The officers eventually had me ride in one of the patrol cars to see if I could identify the attackers in the surrounding area. And my memory of them was hazy due to all the chaos, but I remember the clothes they wore. And we eventually passed by some other officers cuffing the attackers, who I was able to identify from their clothing and from seeing their faces again. I was advised to go to the hospital, which I initially declined due to my current financial situation. However, I eventually decided to go since I had no idea how severe my injuries were. Ultimately, I only had a black eye that healed after a few days, thankfully. The DoorDash order was canceled despite the customer making no attempts to contact me, and this meant I got full pay and could keep the Taco Bell cravings box for myself. And I'm not gonna lie, it was nice to have a place to rest for a bit and enjoy a free meal, despite it being cold by that point. And after examination, I was permitted to rest for a few hours, when I was rudely awakened and told to leave in 10 minutes before security was called. My takeaway from this incident is that even in brightly lit areas with multiple eyewitnesses, it's always best to stay aware of your surroundings. Food delivery at night is no joke. Believe me, I have a laundry list of other sketchy encounters I could share here. But this was the only time that I was attacked in front of so many others, including police officers themselves. I hope this is the right place to share this, as this happened about 5 years ago. Well, actually 7 years ago. I realized the recording is timestamped, so I did make a mistake, and I can also provide the sleep recording if it's allowed. You see, I was spending the night at my friend's house with another friend. It was summer, so we slept with the windows wide open, and she didn't have a screen on her window. We were in a safe area, so we didn't think anything of it. I slept right next to the window with my phone on the windowsill. I used a sleep recording app on my phone because I was known to talk in my sleep, and it was amusing to hear what I'd have to say. It's also important to note that we were completely home alone that night. This time, however, my phone recording caught a man's voice. The first thing sounds kind of like a grunt. Her window was high up, but not second story high, and her house was kind of on a slope. And then we heard a man say, "Oh, hello," in a loud and almost cheery voice. And at the end of the recording, you could hear the man whisper, "Oh, God, something is wrong." Now, thank the heavens nothing happened that night. We weren't sure who the hell it could have been, and it sounded like a full-grown man, and as mentioned, no one was home. I never slept over at her house after that, which I felt bad about because she was absolutely petrified to sleep in her own room again. She also never slept with her windows open again. We don't know if he was trying to break in, or if maybe he thought that it was a buddy's house but then saw 3 teenage girls all cuddling and sleeping together. I'm not sure, but I still get goosebumps listening to that recording. I still don't sleep with the windows open, and I live nowhere near her now.
Hello.
My senior year of high school, I dated this guy, Tom. We dated for over a year, but the relationship was not good. We were always breaking up and getting back together again, fighting a lot. He threatened me often, and overall it was very toxic. His parents also had a very rocky relationship. His dad was an alcoholic and beat on his mom most nights. I even witnessed it when I spent the night there on rare occasions. It was pretty scary. Toward the end of his senior year, Tom cheated on me at his birthday party, and so we broke up again. 2 months later, we tried to get back together, but I realized that I just didn't like him anymore and called it quits for good. And that was 15 years ago, and was the last time that I saw him. Since then, I've heard that he became an alcoholic just like his dad, became very violent, and wound up in a mental hospital. I wasn't sure of the details on this, but I heard that he might actually be schizophrenic. 9 years ago, I met my now husband. We've been married for 4 years and have a 2-year-old and another one on the way. This is just for context. And maybe about a year ago, I got a random text message asking, "My name?" ? Now, I get work calls and texts on my personal phone, so I answered, "Yes?" ? And they wrote back, "How are you?" I should mention that I've had the same phone number that I've had since high school. and I didn't respond because I didn't know who it was, and at this point I figured it wasn't something related to work. A few minutes later, I got another text. "It's Tom. How are you?" When I tell you that I gasped, I responded, "I'm well. I hope you are too." And he wrote again, "What are you doing?" Again, I didn't respond, and then a minute later, "Do you ever think about us? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we still lived together? Do you ever think about getting back together?" I sat in silence, rereading these messages, unsure of how to respond. Finally, I replied, "I'm sorry, Tom, but no. I'm married now and wish you the best, but I don't think that we should have any form of communication." And he responded, "Okay, sorry." Now, I thought this was weird, but whatever. Maybe the dude is lonely and just decided to reach out. Who knows? That was that. Now, last week, his mother showed up at my family business. I've worked here since high school in different roles, and she and his father have gotten a divorce, and she now has a boyfriend she seems to actually be happy with. We exchanged pleasantries, and then she asked, "Did you hear about Tom? He was in an institution." I said I'd heard that and that I was sorry to hear it, and she said, "He killed several animals, and that's why he ended up getting locked up." Again, I said that I was sorry to hear that, and then she said, "Yeah, but he's out now. He's been for a while. You know, you were always my favorite girlfriend he had. Do you ever think about him?" I wasn't sure what to say to this. I wanted to say, "Lady, that was in high school, no." Instead, I said, "No, I'm married now with a toddler. I don't have much time to think about anything." Trying to lighten the mood, I guess. And she then responds, "You know, he's not a bad guy. I don't see him that much anymore, but when I do, he still talks about you. He wonders what could have been. Would you ever be open to talking to him?" And that's when I shut things down. I told her it was great to see her, but that option was off the table now and forever. I said I had to get back to work. I walked away and hid in the back until she left. What in God's name, though? This high school relationship was years ago. I want no part of him or his family, and I'm just so sincerely hoping that he doesn't pop up at my place of work. I have no idea if he's still around the area, but I really, really hope that his institutionalized self isn't. A few weeks ago, me, a 23-year-old female, and a friend, 24-year-old female, planned to go to an event together since we only had free time after work, and we decided to get an Uber so we wouldn't take too long to arrive and could enjoy more. The first half of the ride was really normal. It seemed like a normal, polite dude. But as soon as we got to the highway, his attitude seemed to change, and he seemed a lot more irritated. Me and my friend didn't pay much attention, though, and just kind of kept chatting between us. Our attention was drawn when he started shouting with another driver. He turned to us and said he was going to pull over. I tried objecting, but he ignored and pulled over anyway. He reached out for the glove compartment and pulled out a gun. It's important to note that guns are illegal in my country. We were just watching this unfold with held breaths, and when the other guy drove away, we let out a sigh of relief. But then, we were still stuck in a car with a crazy dude with a gun. And after that, he went back to driving and apologized to us, saying that the guy was tailgating him. I let out and, "Oh, got it." And he kept talking. "That guy's lucky that you two girls are here, or else I would have followed him and shot him in the face. Sleazy idiot." I look over at my friend and she's in shock and paralyzed. I'm in shock too, but trying to keep my cool because the last thing I want is to get him annoyed at us. If he was willing to shoot that guy for tailgating, I didn't want to know what he would do to us if I said the wrong thing. "No, it's okay, I understand," I say, trying to appease him. "These guys need to be taught a lesson," he continued while I just agreed with my head. "I did that before, you know. You just trap the guy in an empty street, and when he leaves the car, bang." Did he just admit to murder? Was the only thing running through my mind. But I managed to keep calm and just agreed with him the rest of the way. He did deliver us in the right place with no more incidents, and I waited a few weeks to report this since he had my home address and wouldn't be hard to figure out who reported him. Nobody showed up at my home with a gun, thankfully, at least until now, and an Uber has answered my report saying that they started an investigation, and I hope this guy doesn't do this to anyone else. To clarify, I'm a 16-year-old female who lives in a very, very small town, and this happened 3 months ago. Every morning, I would go out to our yard, drink some coffee, and watch the sunrise. One morning, a guy with dirty brown hair and a dirty face came walking by, and he waved at me while I sat there, and of course, I didn't want to be rude, so I waved back. And this continued for about 3 weeks until one afternoon while I was playing with my dogs outside, I saw him just standing there, watching me. Of course I waved, but I had never seen him at this time of day, and he waved and then just walked away. I didn't think much of it because I was naive. Then came the morning I'll never forget, ever. I was sitting outside, and as always, he walked by, but this time, when I waved at him, he came to my gate, and I froze. He started small talk, and slowly I started to get up, starting to feel scared. He told me to wait, and I stupidly waited. My dog started barking at him, and he said, very agitated, "Your dogs are very mean. When I tried to get in, they wanted to bite me earlier." I stood there and wanted to cry, and then he told me I'd rather stay safe and keep by my pets. And I kid you not, he pulled out a dead rat from his pocket. I ran, and since then, I've never gone outside during those times. I met a guy on Tinder. There was a good feeling from the start, and we quickly decided to see each other. He asked me to come and sleep at his place, which I accepted because we had mutual friends, and I told myself that he was definitely someone I could trust. I arrived at his house at 9 p.m., and I immediately saw that he was not as I had imagined. He looked dirty. His apartment resembled a squatter's nest, and there was a smell of stale tobacco in every room. When I came into his house, I saw a stack of books on autism, and I asked him about it. I learned at that moment that he is autistic with Asperger's and has difficulty differentiating right from wrong. He told me that he knows how to analyze nonverbal language very well and that he can tell what a person is thinking just by their attitude. I don't know much about neurodivergence, but I immediately wondered what his inability to recognize right from wrong meant. He offered me a glass of alcohol, which I accepted, and as I followed him into the kitchen, I saw a weapon placed on the counter. I panicked a little when I saw this, and seeing my reaction, he explained that he was not loaded and that it belonged to his father. I never knew if it was a real weapon, but I started to feel uneasy at that point. On Tinder, he told me that he wrote quite a bit like me, so he showed me a poem that he wrote on his computer. It recounted the assault of a child in quite precise detail, and I freaked out but pretended to appreciate his talent because he was really starting to scare me. He then talked about his ex, and he told me that they had fun choking and drowning each other in the shower because they wanted to know what it felt like to have control over the other's life. It was too much at that point. I had brushed aside many red flags in just a few hours, but I just wanted to leave. The only problem was, I had to sleep at his house, so I had to find a plausible excuse to leave without him realizing I was fleeing the situation. I was afraid that he had bad intentions and would come after me if he understood that I was afraid and had figured out his little game. I discreetly sent a message to my father with the address so that he could pick me up immediately. I explained to the guy that ultimately I couldn't stay, but that I was really disappointed not to be able to stay longer. I played the hypocrite to perfection. At that moment, we were both in bed, and I was just looking at my phone, waiting for only one thing, to find out when my father was going to be there. And at one point he asked me if I was in a hurry to leave because he noticed that I was looking at my phone regularly. I was scared because I remembered him saying that he knew what a person was thinking just by their attitude, and I told myself that he was going to take action if I didn't hide my fear. I managed to make him believe At least, I had the impression that everything was fine and that I was in absolutely no hurry to leave at all. He offered me a massage, which I tried to refuse, but not wanting him to understand my discomfort, especially since I was soon out of trouble, I accepted. I found myself in my underwear with him on top, and it was horrible. And just as he was about to touch my chest, my phone rang, and my father was in front of his house. I got dressed up quickly and barely said goodbye as I left the apartment. I sent him one last message explaining that I didn't want to follow up because his behavior really freaked me out, and then I blocked him. One of my friends matched with him on Tinder a few days later. He had offered for her to come and sleep at his place, and I warned my friend, who didn't follow up on this guy. I am at my parents' house for the summer. All the lights were off and the cars were missing from the driveway, despite 4 people being in the house. It was 7:30 at night, raining, and a black truck pulled into the driveway. A young guy in normal clothes, I guess black hoodie and sweatpants, knocked on the door, and my sister, who's 8 years old, answered the door with our big dog barking upstairs, and they asked her 3 things. Are your parents home? Can they hunt the deer that are on our property? And do your parents want to go hunting with them? She said yes, and that her parents were home and went to get our dad. The weird thing is that there are never any deer on our land, and it's not deer season. My dad came down to talk to them, and they changed their story. Now they were saying they wanted to hunt turkeys on our property. We do sometimes have turkeys wandering around, but not today. They told our dad all about the many guns they had in their trunk, and they said that they came from Alabama to hunt. Then they asked if they could hunt on what was clearly our neighbor's property. My dad sent them away, but they drove past our house a couple more times after that. I don't know if this is that strange in New England, but where I'm from, it definitely is. Also, it could just be my theater mind being overdramatic as always, but I thought I might give it a shot, and worst case, I'd write a cool horror story based on this encounter. What do you think? I was 11 years old when this happened, currently a female, 24 years old, visiting my dad and stepmom over the summer in Saskatchewan, Canada. My dad worked long days during the week, so on her off day, he would plan for my stepmom to take my sister, 8 at the time, and me out for a day to bond with us as we didn't know her super well yet. She took us to get our nails done, to the mall, and on the way home we stopped at a McDonald's. We planned on eating inside the restaurant, but it was very busy, so my stepmom asked my sister and me to find a table and wait there while she went to the counter to order our food. I noticed this rough, older-looking woman, possibly in her 60s or 70s, looking towards the table my sister and I were seated at. All I could remember was thinking she looked like a drugged-out Susan Boyle. She appeared possibly homeless and addicted, so I didn't give her much thought, letting her do her own thing while I tried to talk to my sister about random stuff. Once my stepmom came back to the table, this woman was already approaching us and then stopped behind us. She just said hello, so we all kind of said hi back and tried to ignore her. She asked if we were my stepmom's daughters, and my stepmom replied, "They're my stepdaughters," trying to simply shut her down quickly. The lady said we were beautiful girls and began to walk towards the door. She stopped one last time and asked, "How old are they?" And we had the impression that she was on her way out, so my stepmom just said, 11 and 8. And her eyes lit up. She looked at me with a strange expression. "I've always wanted an 11-year-old. I'd buy her from you." That definitely crossed a line, so my stepmom finally told her that we were trying to eat lunch and asked her what she was even saying in a somewhat aggressive tone. The lady got one last look at me and then finally left. She definitely didn't have the money to buy me, even if I was for sale anyway, so I wasn't worried. I think she was possibly on some drugs and not in her right mind. But knowing my shy self at 11, I wouldn't have known how to get rid of this lady if she tried to talk to us without my stepmom being there. We weren't super close then, but I respected her a lot after that day for being ready to protect us, even in a minor situation like that. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I was heading home from my friend's house one night at around 11:30 p.m. My friend lives about 25 minutes away, and the fastest route home is through the back roads. I live in a small rural town. Now anyway, I was driving home with one other car about 4 car lengths in front of me. I was about 5 minutes from my house when I saw the car's taillights suddenly break. Then the car sped off and turned onto a road where I couldn't see it anymore. I didn't think much of it. Maybe a raccoon ran out in front of them and they didn't want to hit it. As I reached the part of the road where the car had slammed onto its brakes, a big man, probably over 6 feet tall in a black hoodie, jumped out in front of my car, flailing his arms and yelling at me. I swerved to the right to avoid hitting him and looked in my rearview mirror, but at that point he was gone. This part of the road had houses, but where this man was, there were none. No street light, no broken down car. I raced home and called my husband, who was about 2.5 hours away at an event and wouldn't be home until after midnight. I told him what happened and how the man just disappeared. I was terrified to get out of my car to walk into our house. He stayed on the phone with me until I got inside and immediately headed home. There have been a lot of weird break-ins around my area lately with people trying to steal cars. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I stopped my car. Not that I ever would. I've seen way too many true crime documentaries at this point, and I avoid taking that way home now, and when I do, that's all I think about. Yesterday, I celebrated my birthday. I invited my ex-girlfriend, Emma, because we're still really close friends. She took the train to get to me, which takes about 1.5 hours and requires changing trains twice. She left around midnight, so she should have been home at around 1:30 to 1:45 a.m. Shortly after 1 a.m., she texted me about a weird dude following her after striking up an upsetting conversation with her about, quote, whether she was gay. When she truthfully answered that no, she's just trans, hoping he would go away if she was friendly enough, he went on about why she was trans even though she knew it was satanic. He also told her that he'd already noticed her on the train that same morning, which just strikes me as especially creepy. She got off at a stop intending to wait for her subway home, but he got off with her and wouldn't leave her alone. The next subway to her place wouldn't come for another 25 minutes and the stop was completely deserted. She sent me multiple anxious voice messages until she eventually called me, borderline crying and panicking, saying that she had run away from the station and was now lost, with little idea where she was, even less than an idea of how to get home, and her phone was at 8% battery. She didn't have any money to call a cab either. She couldn't go back to the station because this guy was presumably still there, and he had followed her when she had tried to take the next train to the direction that she had come from in an attempt to get away from him. I advised her to call the police, which she did. They apparently came and took her statement and left again, leaving her there on the outskirts of a big city with still no idea how to get home. I told her to use Google Maps to try and get home and try to save some battery, but to update me periodically. She called me again a few minutes later, saying that she was 45 minutes on foot from home, but had thankfully managed to reach her mother, who was coming to pick her up from where she was, and I stayed on the line with Emma until her mom got there. And I'm so angry. Emma already struggles with severe anxiety and agoraphobia. The fact that she managed to make it to my birthday party is an achievement for her, and this is not going to help at all. This was in 9th grade, and I had walked into class. I had history this period, which definitely wasn't my favorite, and my teacher for this class was a bald white guy and an old-looking man with blue eyes, and he seemed old and frail, but had a mouth on him. I won't say his name for privacy reasons. He was weirdly really nice to all of his female students, always giving them compliments and calling them a good girl. I don't think of it as something weird until I heard countless girls sharing things about what he would say to them. He'd act really weird and flirtatious with the young female students and talk to them as if he weren't their teacher. Most girls felt really uncomfortable while being in the room with him and even nervous. He had this aura that was off, and it made the whole classroom feel sort of eerie. It would be very awkward listening to him talk with his students, and hearing it would make your skin crawl. "You're such a bad girl," he'd say. "Doesn't it just sound wrong? Let me know if I'm overreaching here." Now, one day, he just disappeared and was never seen again. People flooded their social medias with different theories on why he was gone. Some of them were outrageous, but could be true. But it turns out, he was a predator and had assaulted many girls in our school, and he was actually arrested soon after and apparently never seen again. More girls came out with more stories about it, sharing their experiences. And I saw this as a relief because most of the time he'd make all of his students feel uncomfortable anyways, including myself. But really, good riddance is all I can say. It began the summer before I entered high school in 2018 with innocent messages on Facebook. I never understood why he continued to message me, and after a couple of days of him texting 6 to 7 times in a row without reply, he stated that he was 26, from my hometown but stationed elsewhere in the Army, and had plans to find a young wife to cherish. I made it clear that I was 14 and uninterested and then blocked his account. The next day he made another account calling me baby girl and telling me that I was what he wanted in a wife. This wasn't the first time that I had dealt with an older man interested in me. Naively, I just muted the chat and moved on with my life. I stopped thinking about him, enjoyed my summer, and then started high school. Everything was going great until the packages started to arrive. First, a necklace with his name on it, and then one shaped like a heart. They had receipts and were expensive. I was terrified that he had found my address, so I showed my mom everything. My mom tried to return the gifts. I'm not sure why that was her reaction, but he refused. Showing my mom the messages was the first time I had actually read any of them. They were weird, and some were about eloping with me when I turned 16. My mom found out that he went to the high school with both of my older siblings. My sister recalled him as a weird anime nerd, and he was friendly towards my brother, also an anime nerd. I ended up blocking a few more accounts and tried to ignore what I thought wasn't that serious of a situation, and after this, we never spoke of him again. One afternoon in November of my freshman year, I was in my gym class with friends when I received a call with no ID. My friends told me to pick up, thinking it was a telemarketer or spam that we could mess with. We all heard something along the lines of, "I'm waiting outside the gym for when you get done with class." We thought it was another friend pranking us and laughed and moved on. After class, I had this weird gut feeling and tried to leave through the visitors' doors, but the coach told me it wasn't permitted. I walked out and there he was. He grabbed me by the throat, jammed his mouth against mine, and told me he was disappointed I wasn't wearing the jewelry that he had got me, and then walked away. I sprinted to my theater teacher, the only teacher I trusted, and cried for the rest of the day until convincing my brother to pick me up. I blamed the tears on the recent passing of my grandpa. I kept receiving CDs, mixtapes. He wrote many songs about me, bracelets and cards until COVID began, but I never saw him in person again after that day. So, I'm a 19-year-old male, and my family moved into a nice house some months ago, back in November 2021. We had planned moving for years and basically already secured the house for us when the pre-owners, who apparently went to school with my parents in the 90s, were still living in it. We got the house sometime around the summer of 2021, but had to wait a few months for them to actually pack all their stuff and move out entirely as their new house couldn't be finished in time because of COVID. I was pretty happy when we finally moved in, since my parents basically gave the entire basement to me, because it wasn't like we were going to store anything anyways. We moved from a 70 meters squared flat to an almost 200 meters squared. Don't know the exact numbers, but probably 3 times the size, but I'm just guessing. House with 3 floors and all of that. I was really impressed because we lived pretty poor for my country, in Germany, and up to this point, I had to share a room with my 6-year younger brother for as long as I can remember. And as you can probably guess, I had no way to fill all the space with my stuff, Basically just set up my PC and my desk in the corner of one room with my bed and a wardrobe in the other end of the room. This was the room the furthest from the emergency exit, as my family called it. Basically just an old wood shed embedded into the ground, which the pre-owner made accessible from the inside the house by removing a wall and putting new steel bars between the basement and the shed. It freaked me out the moment I first saw it. There are all sorts of bugs and spiders crawling in there, and it smells like no one has cleaned it in there since the house was built. A really, really heavy, dusty smell comes up every time you move a wood piece even by an inch. On the other side of the shed's door is our yard, directly accessible by a small fence. Usually because of my very impulsive dog, no one tries to go near the fence as he'll storm the window and bark at the slightest gush, like a bird pooping on my car and the poop making a splash or some random pedestrians walking by like 5 meters away. No idea how he hears these things. I usually just run after my dog to the window just to discover what it was afterwards. For the last few weeks, however, I've been woken up several times by a weird squeaky noise at night. Up until earlier today, I have no idea where this noise was coming from. Then my dad opened the emergency exit door from outside and I immediately felt uncomfortable. This was the noise I heard all the time. When I confronted my mother about it, as she could be the only one going through that door, my dad works night shift 25 minutes drive from home and my brother's away on school trips since this morning, she said that she would never go through that shed. She, quote, couldn't even climb in or out without breaking her legs. I went with that answer as I would probably hear the door connecting our basement with the rest of the house too if she were to go in or out through the door. I confronted my girlfriend who stayed at my place for the weekend, and I remember hearing the noise clearly, but at that point, I just assumed that one of my family members were sneaking out or something, so I kept quiet. She said she didn't hear anything. I told myself that I had probably just imagined or dreamt it, like those dreams that repeat every now and then. At this point, I'm feeling very uncomfortable and paranoid about the situation. When it got to evening today, I showered and got ready for bed, but wasn't really tired, so I stayed on my phone for a few hours up to around 1 a.m., just watching TikTok and doing Duolingo. Then I heard the noise again. Somehow my dog had not heard it, and my family has never heard it, and my girlfriend has never heard it either, and I'm just lying in bed not knowing what to do. But I decided not to be a coward, so I opened the WhatsApp chat with my girlfriend and start recording with the flash on in the low-quality WhatsApp video because I was panicking and thought that I'd be more likely to send it directly to her if I had to confront someone. I ended up with a 3-minute video of me slowly scanning every inch of my basement with the camera first, and I thought that they would 100% be able to spot me with a camera with a flash on, so I armed myself with a sort of makeshift weapon from a chain and an old lock. Now fast forward 2 incredibly long minutes. I look like an incredibly paranoid idiot and end up sending the video to my girlfriend by accident. I can't remove it because she is very insecure, and a deleted message in the middle of the night would certainly bring up more problems than just sending it. I'm sorry for the long post, I just had to put this somewhere. I don't know where else to turn to, as no one would believe me, and I don't think it's a mental problem, as I've been fairly mentally stable my whole life with no family history of mental illness. I just don't know where to turn with this, as it is really messing with me right now. I'm definitely going to call off work tomorrow and look further into this. I can't set up a camera, as my old phone's camera only works when unlocked, and the screen would definitely be visible in case of an actual intruder. I don't know how they would react in such a situation, but I sure am not going to find out. I've heard stories of people living in other people's houses without them knowing, and I'm pretty sure that's probably what I'm dealing with. But if I told this to anyone else, they would tell me that I'm just imagining things or that I'm going crazy. And I hope that maybe you guys can give me some advice on how to proceed. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And there are super fun live streams every Sunday and Wednesday night. I'd love to see you there. If you got a story, be sure to submit them over email to letsreadsubmissions@gmail.com, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button here on YouTube to check out the extra perks for members of the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.